The night sky over Manhattan glittered with 1,000 lights, as if the city was dressed for a ball. Skyscrapers gleamed against the darkness, their reflections shimmering on the Hudson River. Yet in a private penthouse high above it all, Audrey Mitchell sat curled on a velvet couch, her phone pressed tightly against her ear, her chest rising and falling with restless breaths. "Dad, I've told you already," she said, her voice trembling between defiance and exhaustion. "I will not marry a man I don't love to rescue Mitchell and Company from bankruptcy." On the other end, her father's tone was ice. "Audrey, you've lived too long chasing your little dreams, your sketches, your trinkets. This family has a legacy, and you will not watch it crumble. GreenTech has extended a proposal. If you marry their heir, the deal is sealed. If not—" His pause was cruel, deliberate. "Then you may consider yourself no longer a Mitchell." The line went dead. Audrey stared into the glittering skyline, her throat tightening. She had returned from Seattle only weeks ago, her suitcase still unpacked in the corner. She had thought returning back to New York might mend old W&D, help her reconnect with her estranged family. Instead, she found herself a pawn in a marriage arrangement that felt older than time, as if she were nothing more than a signature on a contract. Her best friend, Maya, leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, eyes full of sympathy. "Girl, he's earnest this time, isn't he?" Audrey nodded, running a hand over her natural curls. "They want me to marry someone I don't even know. Someone from GreenTech. Can you imagine? A stranger, probably arrogant, expecting me to smile and play the trophy wife." Maya tilted her head, a mischievous spark in her eyes. "You may need a stranger of your own choosing, someone so outrageous that your father would never push the GreenTech deal again." Audrey frowned. "What are you talking about?" Maya grinned, holding up her phone. "I've got this app. People meet for short-term arrangements, fake dating, quick marriages, etc. You need someone convincing enough to stand by your side, flash a ring, and say, 'I do.' Once your family backs off, you can figure out how to get the rest out." Audrey laughed bitterly. "You're insane," maybe Maya said. "But you're cornered. You want freedom. Sometimes the only way out is through." That night, as the city roared beneath her windows, Audrey swiped through profiles. Her finger froze when she saw a photo of a man whose gaze pierced the screen. Kevin. His profile was simple, looking for something real, mature, steady, not afraid of commitment. He was breathtaking, broad shoulders beneath a dark suit, sandy blonde hair neatly styled, eyes like a winter ocean, cool, distant but hiding storms beneath. Without letting herself overthink, Audrey pressed connect. 2 days later, she stood outside the grand marble hall of a Manhattan courthouse, her palms sweating. The building loomed above her, all columns and authority, as if daring her to step inside. Maya whispered, clutching her arm, "You don't have to go through with this." Audrey exhaled. "If I don't, I'll be sold off like cattle. At least this way I choose." The heavy doors opened, and then he appeared. Kevin Green. Up close, he was even more striking than the photos. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to the world bending around him. Yet there was something gentler in his eyes when they met hers, something she had not expected. "Miss Mitchell." His voice was low and warm, touched by an accent only money and old education could polish. "Yes," she breathed. "You must be Kevin." A faint smile curved his lips. "Shall we?" The ceremony was absurdly fast. Signatures, a brief exchange of vows spoken more like business terms than promises, a pair of witnesses clapping politely as they sealed it with the most perfunctory of kisses. Yet Audrey felt her pulse stutter when his lips brushed hers, a warmth blooming in her chest despite herself. She told herself it was adrenaline, nothing more. That evening, Audrey returned to her family's brownstone in Brooklyn, papers clutched tightly in hand. The living room was already crowded. Her father, her stepmother Evelyn and Kiara, her younger half-sister, perfectly posed with a glass of champagne, as if awaiting her downfall. "Well," her father barked. Audrey lifted the certificate. "I'm married. The GreenTech deal is off. Consider your little alliance broken." The silence was thick enough to choke on. Kiara's eyes widened in mock innocence. "Married? To who you expect us to believe you just ran off with some stranger?" Audrey smirked. "Not some stranger. My husband." She dialed Kevin's number on speaker heart, hammering. He picked up almost instantly. "Audrey. Hi, honey." The word tasted foreign, but she forced it out. "My family doesn't believe me. Can you say something?" There was a pause. Then his voice smooth, steady, commanding. "Audrey is my wife. That's all anyone needs to know." Gasps filled the room. Kiara nearly dropped her glass. Her father's face flushed crimson. "You foolish girl. Do you realize what you've done?" "Yes," Audrey said quietly but firmly. "For once I've done something for myself." The next morning, Audrey arrived at the sleek glass tower of GreenTech headquarters. She intended only to thank Kevin and perhaps negotiate the terms of their arrangement. But the moment she entered the lobby, whispers followed her, employees stealing glances, as if they already knew. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, she froze. Kevin sat behind the massive oak desk, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Not in the guise of a casual stranger from an app, not a desperate man seeking companionship, but as CEO Kevin Green, the youngest tech mogul on Wall Street, is a name whispered with equal parts envy and fear. Her stomach dropped. You're the heir." He looked up, a shadow of amusement in his gaze. "Not the heir, Audrey. The owner." The world tilted. The man she had married to escape an arranged alliance was in truth the very man her family had wanted her to wed all along. Audrey's hands curled into fists. "You tricked me." Kevin rose from his desk, each step deliberate, as he closed the distance between them. "No, I gave you a choice. You didn't marry me because your father told you to. You married me because you wanted to. That makes all the difference." His words cut deep, infuriating, yet undeniable. And somewhere beneath the fury, a flicker of something else stirred. Something dangerous. Something like desire. The Mitchell brownstone had never felt colder. The polished mahogany floors gleamed under the chandelier, but Audrey felt like she was walking across ice. Her marriage certificate lay on the table between her father and stepmother, like a weapon, its ink still fresh, its meaning undeniable. Her father's voice thundered through the room. "A courthouse wedding. To a man we know nothing about. Audrey, have you lost your mind?" "Evelyn." Her stepmother lifted her wine glass with a delicate sneer. "She's always been impulsive, Harold. Never understood the value of loyalty to family. Always chasing feelings." Audrey clenched her fists. "I didn't marry for feelings. I married to make my own choice." From the corner of the room, Kiara's laughter spilled like poisoned honey. Dressed in silk the color of champagne, her younger half-sister looked every bit the darling daughter Evelyn had raised her to be. "Well then, father should let me take your place. If GreenTech really wanted a Mitchell bride, I could be that bride. And unlike you, Audrey, I'd do it without complaint." Audrey turned sharply. "Stay out of this, Kiara." But Kiara only leaned forward, eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, sister, you've set off a scandal and think you're safe. Let's see how your mystery husband feels when he realizes he's married into a family drowning in debt." Her father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. This family needed unity, not another of your childish rebellions." He fixed his gaze on Audrey, sharp as glass. "You'll bring your husband to me if you wish to prove this marriage is real. Tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll annul it myself. Audrey's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. Fine. You'll see soon enough. The next morning, Audrey stood in front of the towering glass facade of GreenTech's Manhattan headquarters. The building was a symbol of American ambition, mirrored panels reflecting the restless sky. Employees in sleek suits hurried through the revolving doors, their ID badges swinging like pendulums of power. Audrey's fingers tightened around the marriage certificate in her handbag. She wasn't here to beg her father's approval, no. She was here to prove him wrong, to show that her marriage was not a reckless sham. She stepped inside, greeted by a vast lobby that seemed to swallow sound. A chandelier of cascading glass spirals hung above refracting light into shimmering rainbows. The receptionist looked up, a professional smile in place. Welcome to GreenTech. Do you have an appointment? Audrey hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I'm here to see Kevin Green. Tell him his wife has arrived. The woman's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by something unreadable. Then she gestured toward the elevators. Top floor. He's expecting you. Audrey's heart hammered, expecting her. The elevator climbed smoothly, carrying her higher and higher until the city shrank beneath her feet. When the doors opened, she stepped into a corridor of glass and steel. At the far end, double doors stood ajar, revealing a room bathed in golden morning light. And there he was, Kevin. Not the man she had met outside the courthouse, not the stranger whose steady presence had been her rebellion. Kevin wore authority like a second skin. He stood behind a desk of polished oak, his suit immaculate, his expression calm but unreadable. The skyline framed him like a crown. Audrey's breath caught. You're the CEO. He looked up, eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. I told you I wasn't a stranger. Her pulse roared in her ears. The betrayal stung sharp and merciless. You lied to me. You let me think you were someone else, someone ordinary. Kevin's mouth curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. Would you have married me if I'd told you the truth? The question sliced through the air. Audrey opened her mouth, but no words came. Kevin walked around the desk, closing the distance between them with deliberate calm. Your family wanted you to marry into GreenTech, but you didn't marry because of them. You married because you chose me. That's the difference. She shook her head, fighting the rush of conflicting emotions. You don't know me. You don't know what this marriage means to me. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Then Kevin's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. I'd like to. Before Audrey could respond, the doors burst open. Kiara swept in her designer heels, clicking against the floor like gunfire. She paused, eyes widening as she took in the sight of Kevin standing beside her sister. Then her lips curved into a smile as sharp as broken glass. Well, she drawled, isn't this interesting? My big sister marries a stranger at a courthouse, and he happens to be Kevin Green, the most eligible billionaire in New York. Quite the coincidence. Audrey stiffened. What are you doing here? Kiara ignored her, turning her charm on Kevin. Mr. Green, I'm Audrey Mitchell, Audrey's sister. We'll be seeing a lot more of each other now. Unless, of course, you realize you've married the wrong sister. Audrey's stomach twisted. Kiara stopped. But Kevin's gaze never wavered. He regarded Kiara coolly, as if she were a minor interruption in a day filled with weightier concerns. I don't make mistakes, Miss Mitchell. His eyes flicked briefly to Audrey, especially not when it comes to choosing my wife. For once, Kiara faltered, color rising in her cheeks. But she recovered quickly, flashing a dazzling smile. We'll see about that. She spun on her heel and swept out her perfume, lingering like smoke. Audrey exhaled tension, flooding her body. She's not going to stop. Kevin's expression was calm, almost detached. Let her try. That evening, Audrey found herself in the brownstone, Kiara's words echoing in her head. Her father was waiting in the study, sipping whiskey, Evelyn at his side like a silent judge. So he said, his voice heavy with suspicion. "You've married Kevin Green himself. Convenient. You claim independence yet land the very alliance I sought." Audrey's chest tightened. "It wasn't about you. It was my choice." Her father leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Don't delude yourself. Men like Kevin don't marry women like you without reason. If you think this is love, you're a fool. If it's power, then you're finally learning. Either way, Mitchell and Company will benefit, and that's all that matters." Audrey's hands trembled at her sides. "No, this marriage isn't about you. Not anymore." She left before he could respond, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Later that night, Audrey stood on the balcony of Kevin's Beverly Hills estate, the city stretching below like a field of diamonds. The cool air wrapped around her, but she felt nothing but fire inside. Kevin stepped beside her, his presence steady, quiet. "Your family won't let go easily." She turned to him, searching his face. "And what about you? Why did you marry me, Kevin? What do you really want from me?" Something unguarded flickered in his eyes for a moment. Loneliness, perhaps, or longing. Then his mask slipped back into place. "Maybe I wanted someone who would choose me, not my name." Audrey's heart ached with its weight. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if this marriage was real, or just another bargain in disguise. But as his hand brushed her warm and steady, she felt the world tilt again. The game had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The car ride to Beverly Hills felt like a dream Audrey wasn't sure she wanted to wake from. As the city of Los Angeles sprawled endlessly beneath the warm California sun, she stared out the tinted window of Kevin's sleek black Tesla, her thoughts spinning. Skyscrapers gave way to winding, palm-lined streets, where villas perched on hillsides like thrones carved from stone. When the car finally pulled through wrought iron gates into Kevin's estate, Audrey's breath caught. The mansion was vast, blending glass and modern stone, its sweeping terraces overlooking the glittering city below. It was the kind of home that belonged in glossy magazines, the kind of home she had only ever seen from a distance. Kevin stepped out first, his tall frame cutting an elegant silhouette against the white marble steps. He didn't glance back to see if she followed. He moved forward, commanding, certain she would trail behind. And she did, though her chest fluttered with unease. Inside the house felt like another world. Open spaces, walls of glass that blurred the boundary between indoors and the sky art pieces that whispered wealth without shouting it. Yet for all its grandeur, it felt empty. Kevin said, "This is your home now," as though the words cost him nothing. Audrey let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Home, I feel like I've stepped into a museum. Do I need a tour guide to find the kitchen?" His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "If you get lost, call my name." The simplicity of his tone unsettled her more than any display of arrogance could. The first few days unfolded like an odd dance between strangers. Audrey kept mainly to the sun-drenched library or the rooftop garden, sketching designs in her notebook, while Kevin spent hours locked away in his study, his voice echoing through the halls during endless calls with board members. But cracks in his impenetrable mask began to show in unexpected moments. On the third night, Audrey woke, coughing, her throat raw. She had underestimated the California dryness, and her body rebelled against the sudden climate shift. She stumbled toward the kitchen for water, only to find Kevin's sleeves rolled up, pouring honey into a steaming cup of tea. He looked up, eyes softening. "You should have told me you weren't feeling well." "I didn't want to bother you," she murmured. He pressed the cup into her hands, his fingers brushing hers with surprising gentleness. You're my wife. You'll never be a bother." Audrey felt warmth seep into the cracks of her guarded heart, for the first time since stepping into his world. Days bled into one another, each carrying small moments that stitched themselves quietly between them. One morning, Kevin found her in the kitchen apron, determined to prove she could manage more than takeout. The counter was a battlefield of flour, half-chopped vegetables, and a pot dangerously close to boiling over. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Are you trying to burn the house down?" She scowled, a smear of flour dusting her cheek. "I'm trying to make breakfast. May I?" He rolled up his sleeves and stepped in, moving with surprising ease. His hands guided hers as he showed her how to flip the omelet without breaking it, his chest brushing her back, his voice low against her ear. For a heartbeat, the kitchen shrank to nothing but the rhythm of their breaths, the warmth of his presence, the whisper of something dangerous growing between them. When the omelet landed perfectly on the plate, she laughed, breathless. "Show off." He looked down at her, eyes glinting, guilty. It was on a lazy Sunday afternoon that Audrey discovered another side of him. She had wandered into the living room, only to find Kevin sitting cross-legged on the floor, controller in hand, utterly absorbed in a racing game on the massive screen. The sight was so unexpected that she burst out laughing. He glanced up, unbothered. "Care to join?" Moments later, she found herself gripping a controller, the two of them side by side, shouting and laughing as their cars collided spectacularly on screen. "You cheated," she accused, when he nudged her car off the digital track. He grinned, a genuine grin this time, boyish and unguarded. Strategy. When she finally won a round, she triumphantly threw her arms in the air. Kevin just shook his head, but the sparkle in his eyes lingered long after the game ended. Yet for every sweet moment, there were shadows. At night, Audrey sometimes caught Kevin standing alone on the balcony, staring into the distance, phone in hand, expression carved in stone. He never spoke of what weighed on him, never explained the late-night calls or the guarded look that returned whenever business intruded. And though they shared the same roof, sometimes even the same laughter, there remained an invisible wall between them, a wall built from secrets neither dared tear down. Audrey often wondered, who was the man she had married? Was he truly the stranger she met outside a courthouse, or the billionaire titan who ruled from glass towers? And could she ever bridge the gap between the two? The first actual crack came one evening when rain lashed against the glass walls of the mansion, a rare storm sweeping across Los Angeles. Audrey sat curled on the couch, sketching designs for a new necklace. When Kevin entered, his hair was damp and his shoulders were tense. "Bad day?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then sank beside her, loosening his tie. "The board's restless. There's talk of mergers, betrayals. GreenTech is stronger than ever, but the sharks smell blood." She studied him, noticing the tired lines etched near his eyes. Without thinking, she reached out, brushing her fingers over his hand. "You don't always have to carry everything alone." For a long moment he didn't move. Then slowly his hand turned, his fingers twining with hers. Her heart thudded painfully, and she knew this was no longer just an arrangement. This was becoming something she could neither control nor deny. That night, she dreamed of him not as a CEO, not as a stranger, but simply as a man. A man whose touch lingered, whose gaze unraveled her defenses, whose presence was becoming as essential as air. And when she woke in the soft glow of dawn, she realized with a jolt of fear and longing that her heart was no longer hers to guard. The first whisper came like a breeze through glass doors, so soft Audrey almost dismissed it. Soon, the whispers grew louder, multiplying in the polished corridors of GreenTech and echoing across social media feeds. The new Mrs. Green, a nobody. She married him for money. She'll never fit his world. Audrey felt the weight of those words every time she stepped into the lobby, where polished heels clicked against marble and eyes lingered just long enough to wound. She had grown up with stares half-baked, curiosity, quiet judgments. But this was different. This was war dressed in silk and diamonds. It didn't take her long to trace the source. One afternoon, Audrey returned to the Mitchell brownstone for a family dinner. She hadn't wanted, but couldn't avoid. Evelyn greeted her with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "You look radiant, dear," her stepmother purred, looping an arm through hers. Of course, we all know radiance can be bought with the right jewelry and last name. Audrey stiffened, but it was Kiara who twisted the knife. The society pages are ruthless, aren't they? One article called you the Cinderella who brought nothing to the ball but a borrowed glass slipper. The word stung, though Audrey masked it with a steady gaze. And yet, she said calmly, Cinderella still became a queen. Kiara's smile faltered for a heartbeat, then returned brighter and crueler. "We'll see how long you keep the crown, sister." The following week, the traps began. Audrey found herself seated beside an influential donor at a charity luncheon in downtown Los Angeles, only to discover that her glass of wine had been tampered with. She caught the bitter taste instantly, but not before half the room had turned to watch her choke crimson staining her pale dress. Kevin arrived just in time, his hand firm on her back, guiding her away from the stairs. His jaw was tight, his eyes glinting with restrained fury. "Who did this?" he demanded in a low voice. "I don't know," she whispered, shame burning her cheeks. But she did know. Or at least she had her suspicions. Kiara had been there smiling sweetly across the room, her eyes dancing with delight as Audrey stumbled. If Audrey thought things couldn't get worse, she was wrong. Because then came Vanessa Clark. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Audrey first saw her, an elegant woman stepping out of a sleek black car outside GreenTech, her heels clicking against wet pavement with confidence sharpened by years of practice. Blonde hair spilled like silk over her shoulders, and her crimson lips curved in a smile that knew it could disarm anyone. Vanessa, Kevin said, when she entered his office. His tone was measured, and he was polite. Audrey stood beside him, caught off guard. Vanessa extended a hand toward Audrey with effortless grace. "You must be Audrey. I've heard so much about you." Audrey shook her hand, sensing the steel beneath the softness. "I can't say the same." Vanessa's laugh tinkled like glass. "Oh, Kevin and I go way back, college sweethearts. But don't worry, darling. I'm not here to intrude. I want to help Kevin. GreenTech is under attack after all." Audrey's stomach twisted. The way Vanessa spoke Kevin's name, and her eyes lingered on him as though he were still hers, sent warning bells clanging. Over the following days, Vanessa inserted herself into their lives with the precision of a surgeon. She arrived at GreenTech with folders of advice for the board. She called Kevin late into the evening, her laughter spilling softly through his study doors. She even turned up at their Beverly Hills mansion, under the pretense of delivering documents in person. "Kevin, you should rest," Vanessa murmured one night, her hand brushing his arm as Audrey watched from across the room. "You always work yourself too hard. Let me take some of the burden." Audrey stepped forward, her voice steady but edged with steel. "He already has someone for that." For a moment, Vanessa's smile faltered. Then she turned her gaze, sweeping Audrey from head to toe, calculated and cruel. "Of course, a wife should be supportive. But Kevin and I understand each other in ways few can. Isn't that right, Kevin?" Audrey's heart pounded as Kevin looked between them, his face unreadable. He said nothing. Silence, Audrey realized, could wound more deeply than words. That night, Audrey wandered the vast halls of the mansion, her chest tight. She had thought the most challenging part would be proving her marriage real to her family. She hadn't expected the battle would come from inside Kevin's world, from women who knew how to wield power as deftly as any weapon. In the dim glow of the library lamp, she curled onto the leather sofa, sketchbook forgotten on her lap. Doubt clawed at her. Was she strong enough for this? Or would she drown under the weight of expectations and sabotage? She didn't hear Kevin enter until his shadow fell across her. "You shouldn't listen to them," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "You heard I always hear," he replied, his voice carrying a hint of exhaustion. He sank into the chair opposite, running a hand through his hair. Vanessa, Kiara, Evelyn. They're vultures circling. They feed on weakness. Her throat tightened. Then I may be weak. Maybe they're right. I don't belong in your world. His gaze locked on hers, sharp, unwavering. "Don't ever say that again." Something in his tone, commanding, almost desperate, made her chest ache. They sat silently for a long moment, the storm outside rattling the glass, thunder rolling across the hills. And in that silence, Audrey realized something dangerous. Kevin might be her shield, but he was also a mystery she could not yet unravel. But the shadows kept closing in. Kiara fed tabloids photographs of Audrey taken at awkward angles, twisted into unflattering narratives. "Mrs. Green can't handle Beverly Hills pressure," one headline sneered. Another mocked her Cinderella complex, claiming she used her beauty to trap Kevin. Vanessa, meanwhile, charmed her way deeper into GreenTech's board, whispering of mergers and opportunities, painting herself as indispensable. She threw Audrey sympathetic looks at gatherings, her words dripping with false concern. "Don't take it personally, darling," Vanessa cooed one evening at a charity gala, her hand brushing Kevin's sleeve. "Not everyone is cut out for this life." Audrey's smile didn't waver, but her grip on her champagne flute tightened until the stem threatened to snap. By the end of the month, Audrey felt the walls closing in. She was still the same woman she had been in Seattle, the dreamer, the artist, the designer, but in this world of glass towers and whispered knives, she was treated like an imposter. And yet, when Kevin stood beside her, his presence solid, his gaze steady, she felt anchored. She wasn't sure if it was love, but it was something fierce enough to keep her from crumbling. Still, deep inside, she knew the storm was only beginning. Because every smile from Vanessa, every smirk from Kiara, every whisper from Evelyn told her the same truth. They wouldn't stop until she was broken, and Audrey Mitchell had no intention of breaking. The chandeliers glittered like constellations, suspended above the ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, their crystal arms scattering fragments of light across gowns stitched with diamonds and tuxedos tailored to perfection. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with its restless rhythm, but inside this cocoon of wealth and power, the world seemed frozen in perpetual elegance. Audrey had never been in a room like this. She had grown up watching charity galas and society dinners on television, marveling at the unreachable world of satin gowns and champagne towers. Now she stood inside it, her hand resting on Kevin Green's arm, every eye in the room following their entrance. "Relax," Kevin murmured low, his voice steady against the swirl of the orchestra. "They stare because they envy, not because you don't belong." Audrey tilted her chin, meeting his gaze. His words should have soothed her, but the memory of Vanessa's sly smile and Kiara's biting remarks still clung like shadows. She knew tonight was not only about appearances, it was a battlefield disguised as a celebration. It began subtly. First, whispers swept the crowd, accompanied by curious glances that lingered too long. Audrey caught fragments as she passed. "She's only here because of him. Did you hear what she did back in LA? Not even a real designer, just a social climber. Her chest tightened, but she kept her smile poised, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Then Vanessa arrived late, as though the night had waited for her. Draped in emerald silk that shimmered with every step she glided through the crowd like she owned it. Her lips curved when she saw Audrey. "Darling, you look lovely." Her tone suggested otherwise. She brushed a kiss against Kevin's cheek, lingering just enough for the cameras to catch it. "It's been far too long, Kevin. You never did tell me you'd be attending with a date." "A wife," Kevin corrected smoothly, his arm tightening slightly around Audrey's waist. "Audrey is my wife." Vanessa's eyes flickered, but her smile remained flawless. "Of course. How romantic." From across the room, Kiara watched with satisfaction. The trap was in motion. Hours blurred into conversations and toasts, the ballroom thick with perfume and ambition. At one point, a waiter offered Audrey a crystal flute filled with champagne. She accepted, though her instincts prickled. The liquid shimmered under the lights, golden and inviting. She was about to sip when Kevin's hand closed gently over hers. "Let me," he said, almost casually, before bringing the glass to his lips. It happened fast, too fast. Kevin's throat convulsed after a single swallow, his face paling, his breath catching. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the marble floor. Audrey's voice cracked with panic. He staggered, one hand clutching his chest, the other reaching blindly for support. Guests gasped. The orchestra stuttered to a halt and the room spun into chaos. Without thinking, Audrey moved. She caught him before he fell, her arms straining under his weight. "Help someone, call the doctor now." But the crowd only murmured, fascinated with the scandal unfolding before them. Audrey dragged Kevin toward a quieter corner, ignoring the stares. She pressed a napkin against his lips as he coughed violently, his breath shallow. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare leave me here alone." His eyes fluttered open, storm gray meeting hers. "Audrey?" His voice was hoarse, but something was in it. Something raw, unguarded. "I'm not letting go." The words cut deeper than any declaration of love could. For the first time, she saw past the armor of the CEO, past the polished facade. He was vulnerable, human, and hers to protect. And in that fragile moment, something shifted between them. But salvation came with a price. As paramedics rushed to tend to Kevin, Vanessa appeared, her face painted with false concern. "Oh dear, what happened? Did she give you the wrong drink?" Her voice was loud enough for the reporters at the edges to hear. Kiara, standing conveniently nearby, gasped in mock horror. "Wait, isn't that Audrey's glass? I saw her take it first, before giving it to Kevin." Murmurs rippled like fire through the crowd. Cameras flashed, fingers pointed. Had Audrey tried to harm him? The Cinderella story was unraveling, thread by thread. Audrey's throat closed, panic rising. "That's not true," she said firmly, though her voice shook. "Kevin, tell them. It wasn't me." But Kevin still weakened, could only shake his head faintly, his words drowned by the frenzy. Within hours, tabloids had their headlines. CEO collapses at Manhattan Gala. Was his wife involved? Audrey Mitchell savior or suspect? Audrey sat in the back of the limousine, with Kevin's head resting against her shoulder, his breathing steadier now, but his silence heavy. Flashes from cameras still blinded her through the tinted glass. "They think I tried to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Kevin lifted his head, his gaze steady despite the pallor of his skin. "I know you didn't, but they don't." "Then let them talk," He said, his hand covering hers. I only care about what's true. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. His faith was a lifeline. But would it be enough to silence the world outside? Kevin finally spoke that night in the quiet of the Beverly Hills mansion. He admitted, they'll come after you now, sitting at the edge of the bed, his shirt still wrinkled from the chaos. Vanessa, Kiara. They won't stop until you're destroyed. Audrey stepped closer, her voice soft but resolute. Then let them come. I'm not leaving you, Kevin. He looked up at her, searching her face for hesitation. Even after tonight. Even after the world turned against you. Especially after tonight. She said, her heart pounding. Because for the first time, I know what's real. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, charged with the weight of unspoken truths. Then Kevin reached for her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles, a quiet promise in the gesture. No vows were exchanged, no grand declarations. But their bond had shifted, deepened, rooted in fire and survival. In another part of the city, Vanessa poured herself a glass of wine, watching the breaking news with a satisfied smile. She's on the defensive now, she murmured, her voice dripping triumphantly. Beside her, Kiara smirked. And soon she'll fall. But neither of them realized that the night had given Audrey something far more substantial than fear. It had given her a glimpse of Kevin's heart. And once seen, it could never be forgotten. The rain came without warning, sliding down the tall windows of the GreenTech mansion, like liquid glass. Audrey stood in the library, its high ceilings and walls lined with leather-bound books, offering little comfort. The storm blurred the city below, but her thoughts were sharper than ever, sharp enough to cut through the fragile calm that had lingered since the gala. She traced her fingers across the edge of Kevin's desk. Stacks of documents lay neatly in place, contracts signed with the precision of a man who never lost control. But beneath the order, Audrey sensed chaos, a truth pressing against the polished surface, waiting to break free. It was a photograph that did it. Tucked inside a folder labeled GreenTech Expansion, Seattle Division. The edges were worn from being handled too many times. Audrey pulled it out, expecting architectural blueprints or city maps. Instead, her breath caught. A snapshot. A young woman. Her. Standing outside a small Seattle coffee shop, rain dripping off her umbrella. She remembered that day vividly. Finals week, drenched textbooks, the sudden sight of a man collapsed near the alley. She had rushed forward, helped him up, pressed a warm thermos of tea into his trembling hands before the paramedics came. And then she had left thinking she'd never see him again. Her chest tightened. It wasn't possible. But the photograph was proof. The door opened softly behind her. Audrey. Kevin's voice was warm, but she heard the caution beneath it. He froze when he saw what she held. Her hands shook as she lifted the picture. Why do you have this? For a moment, silence stretched, broken only by the rain tapping against the windows. Then Kevin stepped forward, his expression stripped of its usual composure. Because that day, he said quietly, changed everything for me. Audrey's pulse hammered in her ears. That man in the alley. It was you. Yes. The room tilted. Memories she had long tucked away rushed back, the weight of his body. As she steadied him, the faint scent of blood and rain, the way his eyes had met hers, desperate yet grateful. You knew, she whispered, her voice breaking. You knew who I was this whole time. Kevin exhaled slowly, as though carrying a burden too long concealed. I searched for you after that day. Every year I returned to Seattle hoping to find you again. When my family pushed for a strategic marriage, I saw my chance. Audrey, the arranged union wasn't about business. It was about you, about us. Her chest ached, torn between disbelief and longing. You mean All of this was the sudden proposal, the secrecy, the lies, your way of finding me. He nodded, stepping closer. I couldn't risk losing you again. Audrey shook her head, tears burning her eyes. So you orchestrated everything. You let me think this was some cold, calculated merger when you were actually playing puppet master. How does that make me feel? Kevin's jaw tightened. I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted you back in my life. You should have told me the truth. Her voice rose echoing in the vast library. Instead, you let me marry a stranger. You hid your identity, your wealth, your power. You've been lying since the moment we met. I wasn't lying. He countered, his own control unraveling. I was waiting for the right time to explain. Waiting for you to see me as the man, not the CEO, the billionaire, or the name on the headlines. Just me. Then who are you? Kevin. Audrey's tears slipped free. The man I married, or the man hiding behind masks? The silence that followed was unbearable. Kevin reached for her, but she pulled back, clutching the photograph like a shield. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. She remembered his hand gripping hers at the gala, his whispered promise, I'm not letting go. But now, every tender moment felt tainted, colored by the knowledge that he had led her through a maze of half-truths. I thought we were building something real, she whispered. But how can I trust you when every step has been paved with secrets? Kevin's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed his desperation. Audrey, everything I did was because of that day in Seattle. You gave me hope when I had nothing. I vowed I would never let you slip away if I ever found you again. That's the only truth that matters. Not to me. Her voice cracked. To me, honesty matters. Choice matters. You didn't give me either. Kevin turned away, running a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. So, what would you have had me do? Walk up to you and confess I'm the man you saved 3 years ago, and now I want you to be my wife. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was insane? Audrey swallowed her throat tight. Maybe. But at least it would have been my decision. Not a game. Not this. She gestured around them, the mansion, the empire, the prison of secrets. The weight of her words settled between them. For the first time since she had met him, Kevin looked uncertain, vulnerable, like the man she had pulled from the rain that night in Seattle. And that image broke her even more, because she loved that man. But she wasn't sure if she could love the one standing before her now. The storm outside intensified, thunder rattling the glass panes, as if the heavens bore witness to their unraveling. Audrey stepped back, needing space to breathe. I need time, she said, her voice low but steady. I need to figure out if what I feel for you is stronger than the lies you've told. Kevin flinched, as though her words struck deeper than any physical blow. Audrey, don't walk away. Not now. Not when we've come this far. Her gaze locked on his, storm against storm. You want me to stay? Then give me the truth. All of it. No more masks. No more games. He hesitated. That single heartbeat of silence told her everything she needed to know. You can't, she said bitterly, tears slipping down her cheeks. You still don't trust me enough. Audrey. But she turned the photograph clutched tightly in her trembling hand and walked out before he could stop her. Later in the guest room, she had chosen, instead of their shared bed, Audrey sat curled by the window, the storm finally easing into drizzle. The city lights flickered through the rain, indifferent to her turmoil. She stared at the photograph again. The woman in it smiled faintly, unaware of the path her small act of kindness would carve. Unaware that the stranger she had saved would one day become her husband and her heartbreak. She pressed her forehead against the glass, whispering into the night. Why does love feel like a lie, even when it's real? Downstairs, Kevin stood in the library, where she had confronted him. The photograph lay on the desk, where she had left it, the edges damp from her tears. He picked it up, his chest heavy with regret. He had built empires, conquered boardrooms, and silenced rivals. Yet here, with the woman who had once saved his life, he was powerless. For the first time, Kevin Green didn't know if love would be enough. The first strike came like lightning, sudden and blinding. It was a glossy magazine cover splashed across newsstands and social media. Overnight, "Is Mrs. Green a fraud? The truth behind Lie, the elusive designer." Audrey froze when she saw it on her phone, her morning coffee trembling in her hands. The article claimed she wasn't the true creative mind behind the jewelry brand she had spent years nurturing. Instead, it painted her as a copycat, a woman who had stolen sketches and paraded them as her own. And the source of the claim, her sister Kiara. At first, Audrey told herself it was nonsense. Those who mattered would know the truth. Her clients and partners had seen her work and felt the fire of her creativity. But the whispers spread like wildfire. Investors began pulling inquiries, galleries postponed exhibitions, and the once glowing praise that had lifted her career turned into suspicion. By the time Audrey stepped into GreenTech headquarters that week, the air was thick with murmurs. She felt them before she heard them, colleagues glancing up from their screens, conversations halting as she passed. "Did you read the article? They say she forged documents." Kevin's wife a liar. Audrey kept her head high, but each word cut deeper than the last. The board meeting was the breaking point. Kevin had insisted she join him, perhaps, to show unity. But when Audrey entered the glass-walled conference room, she saw Vanessa seated at the table, a folder in hand, her expression a portrait of feigned concern. "It's my duty to bring this to the board's attention," Vanessa said smoothly, sliding the folder across the table. New evidence regarding Audrey Mitchell's claims of being lie. Audrey's stomach knotted. Inside were scanned sketches, contracts, even email threads fabricated, but frighteningly convincing, that suggested someone else had been behind the designs. That Audrey had merely bought rights, or worse, stolen them. "This is a lie," Audrey said firmly, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Every design is mine. You can't fake my signatures, my inspirations, my sleepless nights." Vanessa's smile was sympathetic, poisonous. "Of course, darling. But the board has to consider credibility. Appearances matter in our world, and with GreenTech under scrutiny already." She trailed off, letting the implication do the rest. All eyes turned to Audrey, disbelief, doubt, pity. Not one pair shone with trust, not even Kevin's. After the meeting, she cornered him in his office, her chest heaving. "You don't believe this, do you? Tell me you know the truth." Kevin's face was torn between anger and exhaustion. "Audrey, I want to believe you, but the evidence." Her breath shattered. "The evidence. You think paper and ink mean more than my word." "It's not that simple," he said sharply, then softened. "Audrey, please. The company is under attack from all sides. I need time to sort this out. Time." The word was a blade. She laughed bitterly, though tears blurred her vision. "When I told you the truth, mattered more than anything, you hesitated. And now, when I need your trust the most, you hesitate again." Kevin stepped toward her, but she moved back, shaking her head. Maybe Vanessa was right. Perhaps I'll never belong in your world. The next day was worse. The room fell silent as she entered the design department where she sometimes visited. On her desk lay a stack of anonymous printouts, memes mocking her side-by-side comparisons of her work, and supposed originals captions branding her a thief. Her throat burned as she flipped through them, her fingers trembling. Laughter rippled from a corner, quickly hushed, but not quickly enough. She fled to the restroom, locking the door behind her. For the first time since marrying Kevin, she crumpled to the floor, sobs racking her chest. She had faced her father's cruelty, Kiara's jealousy, Vanessa's poison, but this public unraveling of her life's work, and this identity theft, broke something inside her. Her reflection in the mirror mocked her red eyes, smeared mascara, a woman unrecognizable from the confident designer who once dreamed of lighting up the world with her creations. By evening, Audrey sat in the garden of the Beverly Hills mansion, staring at the pool lights shimmering like false stars. The city sprawled below, glittering and indifferent. Maya's voice on the phone was a fragile lifeline. "Don't let them take this from you, Aud. You are lie. You've always been lie. No one can erase that." "But they already have," Audrey whispered. "Even Kevin doubts me." There was silence, then Maya's quiet, steady reply. "Then you prove them wrong. You rise. Not for Kevin. Not for them, for you." Audrey closed her eyes, tears slipping free. She wanted to believe. But right now, belief felt as unreachable as the stars above. In a dimly lit office, Vanessa leaned against the desk of a junior employee she had paid handsomely for fabricated documents. "Well done," she purred, sliding an envelope of cash across. "Keep quiet, and there will be more where this came from." The young man nodded nervously, clutching the money. Kiara entered a moment later, her heels clicking. "The humiliation is everywhere. Father even called and said Audrey had ruined the Mitchell name." Vanessa's smile widened. "Perfect. Now we wait. When Kevin finally realizes she's a liability, he must let her go." Kiara smirked. "And maybe then he'll see me." Vanessa laughed softly. "Darling, Kevin doesn't see anyone, but he'll see what he's lost." That night, Audrey sat alone in the guest room, her sketches spread across the bed. She traced each line with trembling fingers, remembering the nights she had drawn them by hand. The hours of passion poured into every curve, every gemstone placement. "They're mine," she whispered to the empty room. "They've always been mine." Yet the world outside believed otherwise. And for the first time, Audrey wondered if the storm would swallow her whole before she could prove the truth. The storm had broken her, but it had not destroyed her. For nights, Audrey sat awake in the guest room, sketches scattered across the bed like fallen leaves. Each page was a fragment of herself, the curve of a bracelet inspired by Seattle's skyline, the fire of a diamond ring drawn from her late mother's laughter, the delicate chain modeled after her own pulse when she first dared to dream. They wanted to erase her, but art was memory, and memory could not be stolen. The decision came at dawn. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes swollen but fierce. "If they want war, I'll give them the truth. Not whispered in corners, not begged for in private. The world will hear me." 2 days later, GreenTech's grand auditorium was packed. Cameras lined the aisles, reporters buzzing with anticipation. The company had officially called an emergency press conference to address rumors threatening its reputation, but unofficially, everyone knew why they were here. Kevin stood on stage, his presence commanding, though shadows of exhaustion haunted his face. To his right, Vanessa glowed confidently, her emerald dress gleaming under the lights. And in the front row, Kiara leaned forward, eyes bright with cruel delight. Audrey walked in last, alone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She wore a black sheath dress, devastating, yet straightforward, her natural curls cascading like a crown. No jewels adorned her, only a thin silver bracelet on her wrist, one she had designed years ago. A silent declaration. "I am enough." Kevin turned, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Audrey!" She ignored him, striding to the podium with the grace of a queen who had been underestimated for too long. "Good afternoon." She began, her voice steady, though her pulse thundered. "My name is Audrey Mitchell, but some of you know me by another name, Lie." The room erupted. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed. Vanessa's smile faltered, and Kiara stiffened in her seat. Audrey raised her hand, silencing them. "For months, I have allowed lies to circle unchecked. I was accused of stealing, of forging, of pretending to be someone I'm not. Today, I end that." She pulled a folder from her bag, laying out documents on the podium. "These are the international registrations for every collection I've ever released. Filed in Paris, Milan, New York, Tokyo, years before my so-called rivals touched a sketchpad. These signatures are mine. These designs are mine. This identity is mine." Screens behind her lit up, displaying her most famous works: the Aurora necklace that had graced runways in Milan, the Eclipse ring praised by Vogue, the Dawn's Whisper tiara, commissioned by a European princess. Each bore her name, Lie, stamped in legal ink. Whispers turned into stunned silence. Vanessa rose from her seat, her voice laced with faux calm. "Audrey, this is impressive, but anyone can forge papers, like you did." Audrey's tone cut like glass. A ripple of shock surged through the room. She lifted another set of documents. "Because unlike you, Vanessa, I don't bribe desperate employees to fake emails. I don't pay tabloids to publish poison. Everything you planted against me traces back to accounts linked to your name." Gasps filled the hall. Reporters scribbled furiously. Vanessa's face drained of color, and Audrey continued, turning her gaze to her sister. "You've spent your life trying to steal what isn't yours. Father's approval, my career, even my husband. But there's one thing you'll never take: my worth. Because worth isn't given, it's created. And mine was forged by my own hands." Kiara's lips parted in shock, but no words came. Kevin stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Audrey with something fierce and unguarded: pride, awe, love. "You knew," she said, voice softer now, though it carried through the hall. "And still you doubted me." His throat worked, but she returned to the audience before he could speak. "I am Lie. I am Audrey Mitchell. I am both. And I refuse to let anyone silence me again." The applause began hesitantly, then swelled, filling the auditorium like thunder. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, not of accusation, but admiration. "How did you start? What inspires you? What's next for Lie?" For the first time in weeks, Audrey stood not as a suspect, not a shadow, but as herself, unbroken, undeniable. By evening, headlines had flipped: Audrey Mitchell reveals she is lie-proof, shuts down accusations. Vanessa Clark under fire for forgery allegations. Kiara Mitchell is silent after her sister's stunning reveal. Vanessa vanished from GreenTech, within days her reputation in tatters. Kiara retreated into silence, her once bright socialite glow dimming under the weight of exposure. Evelyn fumed from the shadows, powerless for the first time. But Audrey's name blazed across the world. That night, back at the mansion, Audrey stood on the balcony, city lights flickering like fireflies below. The cool breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the garden, mingling with the fading echo of applause, still ringing in her ears. Kevin joined her, his hands sliding into his pockets, his posture hesitant. "You were extraordinary today." She didn't look at him. "I had no choice." He stepped closer. "You always had a choice. You chose to fight." Silence stretched. Finally, she turned her gaze, locking on his. "You doubted me, Kevin. When everyone else turned against me, I needed you to believe. And you didn't." his jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face. I was wrong. I see that now. Audrey. I don't. She lifted a hand, halting him. Words are easy. Trust isn't. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. If you want me to believe in us again, you must earn it, just like I earned my name back today. Later, Audrey leaned against the balcony rail when he had gone, her eyes lifting to the heavens. The stars burned cold and distant, but steady. She was no longer the girl who had been humiliated, broken by whispers and lies. She was Lie. She was Audrey. She was both. From now on, she will never let anyone define her worth again. The Los Angeles sun was sinking, painting the horizon crimson and gold. Audrey sat in the back of a black SUV, her sketchbook open, but untouched on her lap. Kevin had been unusually quiet all day, his phone buzzing with urgent calls, his eyes shadowed by something heavier than business. Another board crisis. She asked softly, studying his profile as the car rolled through the glittering streets. He shook his head, his jaw tense. Not the board. Something darker. I can feel it. Before she could respond, the car jolted violently, tires screeching. The driver cursed, slamming the brakes as another vehicle swerved into their lane, forcing them toward the edge of an overpass. Hold on! Kevin pulled Audrey close, just as metal screamed against metal. The SUV skidded sideways, shattering through the guardrail. Time fractured into shards. The world tilted. The roar of collapsing steel tore away Audrey's scream. Then darkness. When Audrey's eyes fluttered open, she was in a dim warehouse, the scent of oil and rust thick in the air. Her wrists were bound, the coarse rope biting into her skin. Beside her, Kevin lay slumped against a metal post, blood trickling from a cut across his brow. Kevin, she whispered hoarsely, wriggling toward him. Wake up, please. He groaned, his lashes lifting to reveal storm-gray eyes dulled by pain. Audrey, are you hurt? No. Just tied up. Her throat tightened as she scanned their surroundings. Shadows moved at the far end of the warehouse. Two men, broad-shouldered, armed. And then a third figure stepped forward, heels echoing on concrete. Kiara. Her sister's smile was crueler than Audrey had ever seen. Well, well. The princess and her prince. How poetic. To watch everything you built crumble in the city of angels. Audrey's heart pounded. Kiara, what have you done? What I had to. Kiara's voice was sharp, desperate. Father chose you. Kevin chose you. Even the world chose you as Lie. But not anymore. Tonight, you lose everything. Tonight, I take back what should have been mine. Behind her, Vanessa emerged from the shadows, elegance twisted into malice. She's right, darling. You don't belong in Kevin's world. Neither of you does. But don't worry, we'll ensure your downfall looks like an accident. The men advanced, hauling Kevin to his feet. He staggered, but even weakened, he radiated defiance. If you touch her, he growled. I swear you're in no position to swear anything. Vanessa cut in smoothly. A staged accident. A car crash gone wrong. The city will mourn its golden CEO. And Audrey. A tragic casualty. Convenient. Audrey's veins iced. She twisted against the ropes until her wrists bled. You won't get away with this. People will know. Kiara knelt in front of her eyes, glittering with envy. By the time they know, it will be too late. Then she lifted a hand, signaling the men. They dragged Kevin toward the center of the warehouse, where a car sat idling its trunk open, a scene prepared with chilling precision. No, Audrey screamed, lunging forward despite her restraints. Don't you dare! One of the men shoved Kevin, sending him crashing to his knees. Vanessa leaned close, her whisper meant for him alone, but carrying across the space. It could have been different, Kevin. We could have been different. But you chose her, and now you'll both pay. For a heartbeat, Kevin's eyes flicked to Audrey. Pain and fear, but also something unyielding. If this is the end, he said, his voice hoarse, then at least it's with you. Audrey's chest was fractured. Don't you dare give up. Not now. Not ever. With a surge of adrenaline, she slammed her bound wrists against the sharp corner of a metal crate. Once, twice, until the rope snapped. The men turned too late. She bolted forward, throwing herself between Kevin and the attackers. One swung at her, but she ducked, grabbing a fallen crowbar from the floor. She swung wildly, catching him across the arm. The clang echoed like thunder. Run, she shouted at Kevin, though her body shook. But Kevin didn't run. Instead, he grabbed the crowbar from her and swung it with deadly force, his blow sending one assailant sprawling. Together, breathless and bruised, they fought side by side, an unspoken rhythm binding them more tightly than any vow. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. Vanessa's eyes widened. What? No, this wasn't the plan. Kiara spun toward her, fury breaking through her composure. You promised no one would find us. But it was too late. The warehouse doors burst open and police flooded in, weapons drawn. The chaos exploded, shouts, gunmetal flashing, Vanessa shrieking as officers forced her hands behind her back. Kiara tried to run, but Audrey caught her wrist, her grip iron strong. No more, Kiara. Audrey said, her voice trembling with grief and rage. You chose this path, and now you'll face it. Kiara's eyes blazed, then crumbled into tears as she was dragged away. Vanessa, in her last act of venom, spat toward Kevin. You'll regret this, both of you. But her voice was swallowed by the clamor of handcuffs clicking shut. When the warehouse finally emptied, Audrey collapsed against Kevin, her body trembling with the weight of what had almost been lost. His arms wrapped around her strong, despite his injuries anchoring her in the storm. You saved me, he murmured into her hair. She pulled back, eyes brimming. We saved each other. The world fell away for a moment. The sirens, the flashing lights, the wreckage of betrayal. There was only them alive together, hearts beating in ragged unison. News broke within hours. Vanessa Clark and Kiara Mitchell arrested in kidnapping plot. CEO Kevin Green targeted in elaborate murder scheme. Audrey Mitchell, the woman who saved him. The city erupted with shock, then admiration. Once maligned as a fraud, Audrey was now hailed as a heroine. But none of it mattered to her. What mattered was Kevin lying in a hospital bed that night, his hand warm in hers. He turned his head, eyes heavy but clear. I almost lost you. Tears slid down her cheeks. You almost lost me because you were willing to face them alone. Don't you see, Kevin? You don't have to carry the world by yourself anymore. We're in this together. His thumb brushed her knuckles. Together, he echoed softly. When dawn broke, pale light filtering through the hospital blinds, Audrey sat beside him, exhaustion weighing her body, but her heart strangely light. There was no mask, lie, or shadow for the first time since the whirlwind had begun. Only truth. And though the road ahead was uncertain, though scars would remain, she knew one thing with unshakable clarity. Their love had survived fire, betrayal, and blood, and it was stronger for it. The sterile hum of hospital machines filled the room, their steady rhythm anchoring Audrey's fragile calm. She sat at Kevin's bedside, fingers entwined with his, her gaze fixed on the man who had nearly slipped from her grasp. His chest rose and fell beneath the thin blanket, each breath a quiet promise that he was still here. After the surgery, doctors had spoken in clipped clinical tones. He's stable. He'll wake soon. Yet hours stretched like lifetimes each second, a test of her faith. And then his eyes opened, storm gray, heavy with fatigue, but alive. Audrey whispered, her throat tightening with relief. Tears blurred her vision as she leaned closer. You came back to me. His lips curved, weak but unmistakable. I promised I wouldn't let go. Her heart shattered and mended all at once. She pressed his hand to her cheek, unable to speak through the swell of emotion. Days later, Kevin's strength returned, and with it his resolve. The world had been watching tabloids buzzing with the kidnapping scandal, the arrests of Vanessa and Kiara making headlines across America. Speculation swirled, would the power couple endure, or would scandal break them apart? Kevin silenced the noise with a single act. On a crisp morning in Central Park, reporters and cameras gathered for what they assumed was a press statement beneath an arch of white roses and twinkling lights. Audrey arrived at his side dressed simply in ivory, her curls pinned back, unaware of what was coming. Kevin stepped to the microphone, his gaze sweeping the crowd before settling on her. 3 years ago, he began, voice steady. A stranger in Seattle saved my life. She didn't know who I was, and didn't ask for anything in return. She showed kindness when I had nothing left. Audrey's breath caught. I searched for her. I built walls of secrets, made mistakes, and nearly lost her more than once. But she is here. She is my truth. She is my wife. His voice faltered, softened. Audrey, I never asked you properly, not as Kevin Green, the CEO, not the man the world thinks it knows, but as Kevin, the man you saved. He turned, dropping to one knee. Gasps rippled through the crowd, cameras flashing like stars. Will you marry me? Not in secret, not in haste, not in fear, but openly before the world, as partners in everything. Audrey's eyes brimmed. For a heartbeat, all sound faded. The reporters, the city, even the winter breeze. There was only him. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. Then louder, steadier, radiant. Yes. The crowd erupted, applause echoing across the park. Kevin slipped a ring onto her finger, an elegant diamond set in platinum. But what made her gasp was the engraving inside lie. The name she once fought to reclaim is now bound forever to their love. 2 months later, New York glittered with anticipation. The cathedral on Fifth Avenue was transformed into a dream-stained glass, glowing in the golden light aisles, lined with white roses and candles that flickered like constellations. Audrey stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, her gown cascading in layers of silk, delicate beadwork, shimmering like morning dew. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider in this world of grandeur. She felt like Audrey, a designer, dreamer, survivor, and bride. Maya clasped her hands, tears shining. You look like every sketch you ever drew of love. Audrey smiled through the lump in her throat. This time, it's real. When the doors opened, music soared. She walked down the aisle, every step a journey through her past. The betrayals, the lies, the nights of doubt, all leading here. Kevin waited at the altar, breathtaking in a tailored tuxedo, his eyes locked only on her. When she reached him, he whispered just for her, "You're my miracle." The vows were simple, but every word pulsed with truth. Kevin said, "I promise never to hide from you again," his voice breaking. "To let you see me flawed, human, yours. I promise never to let lies define us." Audrey replied, tears streaming freely. "To fight with you for you, and for the love that nearly broke us, but saved us in the end." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Kevin drew her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that silenced every doubt, every wound. Applause thundered, bells rang, and the city erupted in celebration outside. They were no longer scandal survivors. They were New York's golden couple, united not by power or convenience but by love tested in fire. Weeks later, life settled into a new rhythm. Audrey poured herself into her designs, now celebrated across the globe. Kevin rebuilt GreenTech with a transparency that silenced critics. They moved forward hand in hand, unafraid. But fate still had one final surprise. Audrey held a small white envelope in her trembling hands in the quiet of their Beverly Hills bedroom. Kevin sat beside her, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" She pressed the paper into his palms, unable to stop smiling. "Please read it." His eyes scanned the words once, then again, disbelief softening into wonder. He looked up, his hands trembling. "Twins." She nodded, laughter and tears mingling. "We're having twins." For the first time in years, Kevin's composure was utterly shattered. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. "You've given me everything I never thought possible. A wife, a family, a future." Audrey cupped his face, meeting his eyes. "And all I ever wanted was you." 9 months later, beneath the same Manhattan skyline, where their love had been tested and redeemed, Kevin and Audrey welcomed 2 tiny miracles into the world, a boy and a girl, their cries filling the hospital room with music sweeter than any orchestra. As Kevin cradled them, his eyes wet, he whispered, "They'll never know the lies, the betrayals, the battles we fought. They'll only know love, our love." Audrey, exhausted but radiant, smiled. "That's the legacy we give them. Not power, not wealth, love." Outside, the city roared with life, but within the quiet cocoon of that hospital room, there was only peace. The storms had passed, the masks had fallen, and love at last had won.